The train left Miles Carver on the platform with a low metallic sigh, the kind of exhalation that felt strangely human and, to Miles's mind, a little defeated. He understood the sentiment. The station in Glenhaven was nothing more than a plank floor, a roof that still bore a tin sign from the 1950s, and a bored attendant who, judging by the headphones wedging a cap of silver hair flat to his skull, had lost interest in conversation sometime last century. Miles, overburdened with his satchel of notebooks and unfiled story ideas, nodded a silent thanks for nothing in particular and stepped into the town's evening hush. His editor had called the assignment a palate cleanser. After 3 years covering disasters, fires that ate neighborhoods in a night, bankruptcies that hollowed cities, political scandals best measured in crushed hope, Miles was supposedly being given something light. "Find me the soul of the place," the editor had said. "Report back with color. We'll run a Sunday spread feature, Forgotten American Corners. Give readers wonder, not worry." Wonder, Miles thought, was a commodity he'd pawned off long ago. No refunds. He had taken the train anyway because refusal would have required energy. And Glenhaven, population 4,103, had once boasted a traveling carnival so famous that children on both coasts begged to visit. Grinwell's Miraculous Midway, the brochures had proclaimed. Miles knew only 2 facts about it. The carnival had folded 15 years ago after a string of financial mishaps, and the ground still sat at the edge of town, fenced, padlocked, and loomed over by a Ferris wheel that locals referred to as the Eye of Rust. He trudged toward the only hotel in town, a stucco building painted the pale orange of old dreams. On the way, he passed a playground occupied by a single toddler who squealed at pigeons. The sound, a quick, high peal, flitted through Miles like a breeze sneaking under a door. For reasons he couldn't name, he almost smiled. But halfway through the impulse, guilt stubbed it out. Grown men on expense accounts didn't giggle at birds, not when they hadn't laughed properly in months. The next morning, he walked to City Hall for archival permission. The clerk, a middle-aged woman whose cardigan shed sparkles when she moved, pointed him first to the library. "It's got microfilm from the carnival's heyday." And then to the outskirts of town. "You'll want to see the place yourself," she said. "Nothing like being dwarfed by memory. And of course, listen." "Listen for what?" he asked. "For whatever you need to hear," she replied, and would explain no further. By noon, Miles found himself standing before the carnival's perimeter fence. Vines had braided themselves through the chain links, threading summer leaves around the "do not enter" signs like nature was swaddling the warnings to sleep. Through gaps in the foliage, he could see the Ferris wheel, its passenger cars tilting at angles that suggested drunkenness rather than engineering failure. A tattered circus tent sagged near a row of wooden stalls. Every breeze teased from the canvas the faint smell of spun sugar, or maybe that was his imagination refusing to starve. The padlock on the main gate was so corroded it resembled barnacles. He was preparing to photograph it when movement inside the grounds caught his eye. A flutter, a twinkling suggestion of light. Then it vanished. Miles blinked, held his breath, and waited. Nothing, just blossoms of silence and roadside dust. His phone buzzed, a message from his editor in all caps. "Any color yet?" Miles typed back a lowercase nope. He slid the phone away and laughed under his breath at the absurd pressure to find color in a place that seemed drained of all of it. The chuckle was tiny, half a syllable. At that exact instant, the Ferris wheel groaned. Miles froze. Metal protested, gears coughed awake, and the wheel executed a slow, creaking rotation, a single deliberate heartbeat of movement before settling back into stillness. He stared, mouth ajar, forgetting to take the photo. Perhaps a bird had landed on a support beam, perhaps the wind had shifted, but the air lay inert around him, thick with late summer humidity, no stronger than a sigh. Curiosity elbowed aside caution. He located a section of the fence where the chain links had pried loose from their posts. With a few pushes, he widened the gap enough to squeeze through. Inside, the grass had grown to calf height and the pavement beneath cracked like dried skin. He approached the Ferris wheel, laid a hand on one of its supports, and felt the metal thrum faintly, as though it were holding in a secret. "Listen for whatever you need to hear," the clerk had said. Miles pressed his ear to the cool iron. He heard only the tiny percussions of his blood. He spent the afternoon walking the grounds. The carnival resembled a colossal music box that had blown a spring, gorgeous details everywhere, hand-painted murals of trapeze artists, bulbs shaped like mythic flowers, gold leaf still winking on ticket booths, yet nothing moved. Even the birds kept distant. Miles took photographs and interviewed ghosts in his mind. How did you get here? Why did you leave? What were your final words? The answers never emerged. Near sunset, he found a carousel under a vault of grime-clouded mirrors. Horses lolled on their poles like marionettes whose puppeteer had abandoned the stage. Because habit was stronger than hope, Miles tried a joke, absurdly addressing the carved animals. Anyone know a good place for a drink around here? His voice ricocheted, lonely. When he turned to leave, his shoulder clipped a dangling mirror, sending it spinning. He glimpsed his reflection sallow, eyes dull, and barked a dark, involuntary laugh at how efficiently life could cannonball off expectations. Two notes of laughter, sharp and rueful. Behind him, the calliope coughed to life. It started with one note, a low C that sounded like a throat clearing, followed by an arpeggio unraveling across the twilight. The carousel lights blinked, dim then bright, and the copper poles twinkled as though dipped in sudden daylight. The horses jerked forward, an inch, muscles carved from timber, flexing impossible belief. Miles staggered back. The music played only 3 measures before sputtering out, lights fading with it until the ride returned to its posture of eternal waiting. He ran. Not out of fear, exactly, but because adrenaline needed somewhere to go, and running happened to be convenient. The gap in the fence cheered at his exit. Only once he was on the road's dusty shoulder did he stop. He watched the carnival over his shoulder, half expecting it to tear free of its roots and chase him on invisible legs. Nothing. Silence reclaimed the land, yet Miles felt alert. The numb quilt he wore around his spirit had loosened a corner. He realized he was sweating and, impossibly, smiling, an ugly, lopsided thing, but real. He scrubbed at it like the smudge of something embarrassing. Back at the hotel, Miles tried to write notes, but the words skittered. What did one file in a report labeled possibly haunted carnivals that respond to laughter? He poured a glass of water, took a sip, and nearly choked, giggling at the absurdity of his brain defaulting to haunted before malfunctioning electrical system. Another laugh bubbled. He clamped it down, unsettled by how good it felt tumbling up his throat. That night he slept little. He kept remembering the carousel's half-alive music, how the air had tasted electric, like sky, moments before a storm. Morning brought a plan. If laughter triggered the machinery, an obvious test beckoned. Bring laughter. He needed company, somebody quick to giggle. Glenhaven, he suspected, was rich in retirees. Not exactly fountains of mirth. Then he thought of Jamie Del Toro, the teenage desk clerk at the hotel who cracked jokes while handing out keys. Jamie laughed at his own puns, tiny detonations of joy. Perfect. Miles found Jamie skateboarding outside the hotel, headphones draped around his neck, playing something that sounded like video game beeps set to drum machines. Want to see something weird? Miles asked. Always, Jamie replied, kicking up his board. They crossed town. Jamie filled the journey with commentary about school boredom, favorite horror movies, and how Glenhaven needed a serious injection of bananas, by which he meant excitement. When Miles explained the laughter phenomenon, Jamie didn't doubt. He laughed in anticipation, a gentle, rolling ha-ha that made crows startle from telephone wires. At the fence, they slipped through the gap. Noon, heat shimmered across the grounds. Jamie surveyed the silent carnival like a young archaeologist discovering Atlantis and announced, "This place is rad as hell." They went straight to the carousel. Standing among the horses, Jamie cracked a joke about ghosts who refused to boo because it was too mainstream. Miles, unprepared, laughed an honest mid-chest thrum. Instantly, the calliope sprang to life. This time, the song didn't sputter. It soared, full and jubilant, trumpeting a ragtime march that shook dust from rafters. Lights ignited all around them, bulbs chasing bulbs in rainbow spirals. The horses lurched, the platform turned. Jamie whooped, the sound blending with the music. Miles's grin stretched so wide it ached. They mounted 2 painted steeds, Miles's named Brimstone, on a plaque, Jamie's Marshmallow, and revolved through beams of speckled light, hysterical at the sheer, impossible, senseless wonder of it. When their laughter dwindled, so did the music, like a phonograph winding down. The carousel coasted to a stop. Silence returned, but it felt different now, like a held breath instead of a tomb. Jamie punched the air. "Told you, Rad!" The Ferris wheel, bumper cars, swing ride, they tested them all. Each required only a spark of giggle to awaken, then fed on their laughter as fuel. The more they laughed, the louder the carnival's heart pounded. They discovered the corn dog stand warmed itself, popping oil into sizzles if they cackled nearby. The cotton candy machine spun sugar clouds that stuck to their chins like soft pastel beards. Miles tasted one. It melted against his tongue, impossibly fresh. Jamie recorded videos on his phone, squealing when the haunted house speaker croaked out ghost moans after a pun about ghoulish gastronomy. "We're TikTok gold," he exclaimed. By late afternoon, they sat on the grandstands of the abandoned Midway, panting, stomachs aching from hilarity. "How is this even what?" Jamie asked, waving at the cooling but still flickering lights. "I don't know," Miles admitted. "I only know I haven't felt this light in years." Jamie frowned with exaggerated solemnity. "Bro, you need to laugh more. That obvious? Dude, you laugh like someone who just learned humans can make sound." He nudged Miles' shoulder. "But it's a good sound." Miles recognized the warmth blooming beneath his sternum as something he'd misfiled for a long time. Happiness. Or maybe just possibility. Same difference. They made a pact. They would return the next day with reinforcements. "We need a laugh squad," Jamie declared. "Kids, seniors, dogs, whatever. Giggles." Miles hesitated. Journalistic objectivity whispering to keep distance. But the carnival awake now, shimmering quietly, seemed to hum in agreement. He nodded. That night, writing came easily. Miles composed a piece not about decrepitude, but about a mystery, an amusement park that served as laughter's mirror, brightening to reflect any joy placed before it. He didn't file it. Something told him the story wasn't ripe. First, he wanted proof greater than anecdote. He wanted community. For the following afternoon, they returned with 7 town residents, a kindergarten teacher, 2 middle schoolers, a pair of elderly sisters famed for finishing each other's sentences, the librarian who loved spicy romance novels, and a golden retriever named Bucket. Miles expected skepticism, but Jamie's enthusiasm was infectious. At the gate, nervous giggles flitted around like startled moths. Those were enough. Lights flickered. The gate swung inward on hinges previously frozen solid. Inside, magic erupted in stages. The sisters laughed at the dog chasing air bubbles near the fountain, and the fountain answered with plumes of colored water synchronized to swing band music. The librarian shrieked with delight, and the dunk tank reset itself, water sloshing, ready for a volunteer. The teacher, Miss Holloway, tossed a rubber ball that knocked a painted clown target. Her triumphant glee resurrected Carnival barkers' recordings, looping jaunty come-hithers. Laughter layered upon laughter, symphonic. Miles caught himself laughing at nothing, at everything, at the sheer, reckless abundance. Each time joy peaked, so did the park. Brighter bulbs, faster rides, fresher popcorn. The place pulsed like a living organism whose lifeblood was laughter itself. Jamie shouted above the din, "It's feeding on fun!" And the phrasing, goofy and earnest, made even the reserved Miss Holloway double over. They stayed until twilight quilted the sky purple. As people drifted home, promising to return with more friends, the carnival whispered itself back to rest, content. Miles remained, sitting on the steps of the House of Mirrors, alone for the first time in hours. He listened to the crickets stitch night music between blades of grass, felt the Ferris wheel emit a final settling sigh, and realized he was crying. Not the brittle tears of stress he'd hidden in bathroom stalls. These were quiet, grateful, spring rain tears. He visited City Hall the next morning to ask about ownership. No one could locate a deed beyond vague mention of an estate in probate limbo. Effectively, a council member told him it belongs to the town, though no one pays taxes on it because no one will claim liability. It's a bureaucratic orphan. "Could I care for it?" Miles asked, surprising himself as much as them. The council laughed politely until they realized he was serious. "We'll have to draft some language," they said, "but interim stewardship is possible. Grounds maintenance, safety oversight, that sort of thing." Maintenance, Miles thought, consisted mostly of encouraging people to giggle. He could handle that. He extended his hotel stay by a month, then sublet an apartment overlooking the railroad tracks. Every day, he led groups, families, school classes, the bowling league, tourists enticed by social media clips through the gates to experience the phenomenon. He learned the park's preferences. The carousel responded best to puns. The Ferris wheel adored belly laughs. The shooting gallery required quick giggles like popcorn in a kettle. When laughter dwindled, he coaxed it back with stories. Jokes he'd hoarded during newsroom night shifts, anecdotes from interviews that never made print. Jamie dubbed him the Laughsmith, a title Miles wore with bashful pride. Between visits, he cleaned debris, repainted signs, oiled gears that creaked even through enchantment. Manual labor steadied him. Nights found him at his desk in a refurbished ticket booth, drafting a new article, this time a confession. How a journalist drowning in sorrow discovered a place that turned joy tangible, and how that place in turn taught him to live again. He ended each shift by strolling the empty midway, letting solitude settle without loneliness for company. Sometimes, testing, he offered a single chuckle. The lights winked hello like a heartbeat in response. Word spread beyond Glenhaven. Regional papers sent reporters who arrived skeptical and left cackling. Bloggers filmed reaction videos. A scientist from the state university set up microphones. He concluded that certain sonic frequencies, those overlapping with sincere laughter, were converting into kinetic energy via an unknown mechanism. His white paper used phrases like sympathetic resonance, ambient psionics, and heck if I know. With visitors came money, a donation box Miles labeled giggles and maintenance brimmed daily. The funds bought fresh light bulbs, lumber, biodegradable confetti. Jamie proposed renaming the place Laugh Haven. The town council agreed, after a public meeting that turned into a stand-up open mic. By unanimous vote, Miles was appointed official caretaker. He phoned his editor at last. "I have a story," he said, "but I'm not sure I can give it to you." "Why not?" "Because it isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who laughs here." There was a pause. Then, "Write it anyway. We'll credit the town. Hell, let them hold the copyright." His editor's voice softened. "You sound better, Miles." "I am," he admitted, startled by the simplicity of truth. Months passed. Seasons chanted their colors through the trees. Winter came, and people worried that cold cheeks would numb laughter, but bundled crowds arrived, steam curling from cocoa cups, and their laughter twinkled crystalline in the frosty air, gentling snow onto the rooftops. The carnival answered with warm lamplight, icicles refracting hues like jeweled prisms. On New Year's Eve, Miles organized an all-town gathering. They timed a collective laugh at midnight, a roaring harmonic that rolled from toddlers to grandparents. As clocks flipped to a new year, every ride burst to life simultaneously, a cathedral of motion. Fireworks, triggered by nothing more than the rapture in their throats, painted the sky. People swore sparks formed the shape of a grinning crescent, some trick of light. Or maybe the carnival itself smiling back. After the crowd dispersed, Miles stayed behind, walking the grounds under the hush of fresh snow. He paused at the carousel where horses rested like loyal guardians. He placed a hand on Brimstone's lacquered mane. "Thank you," he whispered. A single bell chimed overhead, a soft acknowledgement. He considered the past, the burned houses he'd photographed, the lies he'd exposed, the corruption he'd chronicled until his hope calcified. He didn't regret that work, it mattered. But so did this, tending a place that reminded people of laughter's power and reminding himself. Miles stepped outside the tent and laughed, just because he could. Light unfurled along the midway, bright enough to turn night briefly into dawn. He watched it glow, and in that glow saw not an abandoned carnival, but an endless yes waiting on the other side of every laugh.